Okay, picture section of Magic Eyes Only and Earth's Encounters with Extraterrestrial Technology by Ryan S. Wood. Largely forgotten by the public, this photograph appeared on the front page of the Los Angeles Times and shows what photographic analysis indicates is a disc-shaped craft caught in the glare of anti-aircraft floodlights as air defense batteries fired on it repeatedly during the so-called Los Angeles air raid on the night of February 25th, 1942. Following this traumatic event, a secret memorandum to President Roosevelt by General George C. Marshall led to creation of a top-secret unit to investigate recovered unidentified craft. That's what we're talking about. Here, published for the first time, is a photograph provided to UFO investigator Tim Cooper by Source S1, presumably Thomas Cantwell, attributed to the White Sands Proving Ground on July 4th, 1947. This might be debris burning from one of the crashes associated with the Roswell incident. This aerial photo on the right was leaked to by Source S1. The burned area in the center is the location of the Trinity site where the first atomic bomb was detonated. The circled area to the lower right is the location of the LZ-2, the exact coordinates reported for one of the crashes associated with the Roswell incident. The photo on the left was taken 2 years later in 1949. By this time, the Trinity site had been enclosed by a large circular fence. The alleged crash site is still clearly visible. Perhaps the rings around it are perimeters where test instruments are placed to monitor contamination, as has been seen at Fort Detrick, Maryland, where similar perimeters were established to monitor chemical and biological warfare tests. This and the following photograph were leaked by Source S1 and show unidentified debris. They are published here for the first time. Scan lines in the photographs suggest that they were taken of images from a television screen, perhaps a videotaped briefing. The debris clearly rests in a landscape identical to that in New Mexico, where the Roswell crashes reportedly occurred. This may be the first public view of parts of a crashed UFO. Not really much to look at, but... Also leaked with the debris photographs was this photo of President Truman with Air Force officers and a civilian in a suit. Apparently photographed from a television screen. Does this show President Truman meeting with military and other officials to discuss a response to the dramatic events? Documents state that President Truman established the top-secret Majestic 12 group to study crashed UFOs. This photograph was provided suggesting that the 1947 USAF Scientific Advisory Board was engaged in supporting MJ-12 research. The original manuscript by Vernon Bowen was submitted to the Air Force for review and never returned until it was mailed to Tim Cooper, postmarked Fort Meade, Maryland. The chapter about the Air Force is classified Top Secret Magic. The paper links The paper, inks, pen, and pencil marks are old and authentic according to forensic tests. Among the scientists associated with MJ-12 research was famous aviation researcher Dr. Theodore von Karman, shown at left above, along with General Nathan F. Twining. Clearly, at this point, UFO research was associated with the military's most advanced scientific talent and senior leaderships. This photograph of April 26, 1985, of the original German rocket scientists and engineers holding a portrait of Dr. Werner von Braun suggests that former Nazi scientists smuggled into the United States by intelligence agencies as part of Project Paperclip were involved in MJ-12 research, smuggled in through the Department of Energy Q clearance. So the DOJ can't snoop in on them because they don't have the right clearance. In addition to numbers of senior U.S. officers, scientists, and other officials associated with the Majestic 12 program, annotations of these photos suggest that the United States shared highly secret discussions with Soviet officials on this dramatic and global phenomenon. At left is feared Soviet secret police director Lavrentiy Beria. At right is Sergei P. Korolev, chief designer of USSR space program. Documents later suggested that it was feared radar sightings of UFOs might be misidentified by the Soviets and lead to launching of nuclear missiles during the Cold War. Here's our nerds. This is a reconstructed drawing by Thomas Cantwell on December 30th, 1996, of the unidentified aerodyne found on July 5th, 1947, south of Socorro, MN, Montana, by military and civilian members of the Armed Forces Special Weapons Project, approximately 100 feet long, with chime in aft portion at 60 feet, smooth skins, no intakes or exhaust. Material was not inert. According to Cantwell, such research led to development of highly advanced design based on the recovered UFOs. Some were apparently not disc-shaped, but similar to lifting body and other highly streamlined experimental aircraft known to have been tested by the military and NASA. The leaked source provided this photograph suggesting that the exotic flying wing pictured here was another design derived from analysis of crashed UFO. NX-35. Who would take and analyze photographs of UFOs, crash sites, and related matters? The citation to Master Sergeant Harry Cooper, father of Tim Cooper, who later received leaked UFO documents, specifically acknowledges his support to the United States Air Force UFO program. Master Sergeant Harry B. Cooper distinguished himself by meritorious service as non-commissioned officer in charge, printing management branch, and non-commissioned officer in charge, camera section, publishing division, Command Directorate of Administrative Services, Headquarters Air Defense Command, ENT Air Force Base, Colorado, from 30 September 1957 to 1st June 1963. His exemplary knowledge of film processing and printing techniques provided necessary aids in photographic production for intelligence evaluation of gun, camera film, and still photographs requested on call by the Foreign Technology Division and the National Photographic Interpretation Center in their contribution to the USAF UFO program. His exemplary leadership as a non-commissioned officer in the United States Air Force of Special Investigations reflect great credit upon himself, the Air Defense Command, and the United States Air Force. Because there's no way you'd be able to read that through the video. Unless you were like some kind of 4chan nerd. The draft document was pulled from the fire by a counterintelligence agent that wants to work for James Jesus Angleton. It clearly mentions Majic and Jehovah MJ and sets up several directives with profound implications. The authenticity of the document based on forensic testing is very strong. What's this say? Project Majic and Jehovah, Project Evero, Project Parasite, Project Phehelion, Phehelion, Project Phehelion, that's new. In the context of the above, it has become necessary to review and evaluate duplications of field activities in light of the current situation. To eliminate this problem, I have drafted new directives for your review and consideration. Please evaluate each draft on its own merit with the goal of finding acceptable solutions in which all can agree on. As you must know, Lancer, in all capital letters, has made some inquiries regarding our activities which we cannot allow. Please submit your views no later than October. Your action to this matter is critical to the continuance of the group. While the SOM 101 manual, Special Operations Manual 101 manual, cites two species of alien beings associated with recovered craft. Often discussion centers on large-eyed gray beings with large heads, long limbs, and slender bodies. This image was reported emailed to radio host Art Bell by someone named Albert Lewis, who said it was found with his father's effects after his death. There is a badge shown at the right front of the cart that reportedly shows the word majestic. No way you could read that. Okay, the Chihuahua, Mexico incident, August 1974. The following report, titled Research Findings on Chihuahua Disk Crash Originally from JS to Deneb team members and dated July 23rd, March 1992, was mailed to researcher Elaine Douglas in July 1993, postmarked Santa Ana, California. Elaine mailed the original to Leonard Stringfield, who later published it. It was also sent to a number of British UFO investigators in early 1996, including Nick Redfern and Matthew Williams, bearing a Maryland postmark. The report appears to have been written by a source or sources with intimate knowledge of the incident at issue who desired the release of the evidence to interested parties. The report reads, on 25 August 74 at 22:07 hours, U.S. air defense radar detected an unknown approaching U.S. airspace from the Gulf of Mexico. Originally, the object was tracked at 2,200 knots, 2,530 miles an hour, on a bearing of 325 degrees. At an altitude of 75,000 feet, a course that would interrupt U.S. territory for about 40 miles southwest of Corpus Christi, Texas. After approximately 60 seconds of observation, at a position 155 miles southeast of Corpus Christi, the object simultaneously decelerated to approximately 1,700 knots, 1,955 miles per hour, turned to a heading of 290 degrees, and began a slow descent. In entering Mexican airspace approximately 40 miles south of Brownsville, Texas, radar tracked it approximately 500 miles to a point near the town of Coyame in the state of Chihuahua. Not far from the U.S. border, there the object suddenly disappeared from the radar screens. During the flight over Mexican airspace, the object leveled off at 45,000 feet, then descended to 20,000 feet. The descent was in level steps, not a smooth curve or a straight line, and each level was maintained for approximately 5 minutes. The object was tracked by 2 different military radar installations. It would have been within range of Brownsville civilian radar, but it is assumed that no civilian radar detected the object due to a lack of any such reports. The point of disappearance from the radar screens was over barren and sparsely populated area of northern Mexico. At first, it was assumed that the object had descended below the radar's horizon, and a watch was kept for any reemergence of the object. None occurred. At first, it was assumed that the object might be a meteor because of the high speed and descending flight path, but meteors normally travel at higher speeds and descend in a smooth arc, not in steps. And meteors do not normally make a 35-degree change in course. Shortly after, direction and air defense alert was called. However, before any form of interception could be scrambled, the objects turned to a course that would not immediately take it over U.S. territory. The alert was called off within 20 minutes after the object's disappearance from the radar screen. 52 minutes after the disappearance, civilian radio traffic indicated that a civilian aircraft had gone down in that area, but it was clear that the missing aircraft had departed El Paso International with a destination of Mexico City and could not therefore have been the object tracked over the Gulf of Mexico. It was noted, however, that they both disappeared in the same area at the same time. With daylight the next day, Mexican authorities began a search for the missing plane. Approximately 10:35 hours, there came a radio report that wreckage from the missing plane had been spotted from the air. Almost immediately came a report of a second plane on the ground a few miles from the first. A few minutes later, an additional report stated that the second plane was circular shaped and apparently in one piece, although damaged. A few minutes after that, the Mexican military clamped a radio silence on all search efforts. The radio interceptions were reportedly through channels to the CIA. Possibly as many as 2 additional government agencies also received reports, but such has not been confirmed as of this date. The CIA immediately began forming a recovery team. The speed with which this team and its equipment was assembled suggests that it was either a well-rehearsed exercise or one that has been performed prior to the event. In the meantime, requests were initiated at the highest levels between the United States and Mexican governments that the U.S. recovery team be allowed into Mexican territory to assist. These requests were met with professed ignorance and a flat refusal of any cooperation. By 2100 hours, 26th August 74, the recovery team had assembled and been staged at Fort Bliss. Several helicopters were flown in from some unknown source and assembled in a secured area. These helicopters were painted a neutral sand color and bore no markings. Eyewitness indicates that there were 3 smaller craft, very possible UH-1 Hueys. From the description, there was also a large helicopter, possibly a Sea Stallion. Personnel from this team remained with their craft and had no contact with other Fort Bliss personnel. Satellite and reconnaissance aircraft overflight that day indicated that both the crashed disc and the civilian aircraft had been removed from the crash sites and loaded on flatbed trucks. Later flights confirmed that the convoy had departed the area heading south. At that point, the CIA had to make a choice, either to allow this unknown aircraft to stay in the hands of the Mexican government or to launch the recovery team, supplemented by any required military support, to take the craft. There occurred, however, an event that took the choice out of their hands. High-altitude overflights indicated that the convoy had stopped before reaching any inhabited areas or major roads. Recon showed no activity, and radio contact between the Mexican recovery team and its headquarters ceased. A low-altitude, high-speed overflight was ordered. The photos returned by the aircraft showed all trucks and jeeps stopped, some with open doors and 2 human bodies lying on the ground beside 2 vehicles. The decision was immediately made to launch the recovery team, but the actual launching was held up for the arrival of additional equipment and 2 additional personnel. It was not until 1438 hours that the helicopter departed Fort Bliss. The 4 helicopters followed the border towards Presidio, then turned and entered Mexican airspace north of Candelaria. They were over the convoy site at 1653 hours. All convoy personnel were dead, most within the trucks. Some recovery team members dressed in bioprotection suits reconfigured the straps holding the object on the flatbed truck, then attached them to a cargo table from the Sea Battalion. By 1714 hours, the recovered object was on its way to U.S. territory. Before leaving the convoy site, members of the recovery team gathered together the Mexican vehicles and bodies, then destroyed all with high explosives. This includes the pieces of the civilian light plane, which had been involved in the mid-air collision. At 1746 hours, the Hueys departed. The Hueys caught up with the Sea Stallion as it re-entered U.S. airspace. The recovery team then proceeded to a point in the Davis Mountains, approximately 25 miles north of East Valentine. There they landed and waited until 02:25 hours. The next morning, at that time, they resumed the flight and rendezvoused with a small convoy on a road between Van Horn and Kent. The recovered disc was transferred to a truck large enough to handle it and capable of being sealed totally. Some of the personnel from the Hueys transferred to the convoy. All helicopters then returned to their original bases for decontamination procedures. The convoy continued non-stop, using back roads and smaller highways and staying away from sites. The destination of convoy reportedly was Atlanta, Georgia. Here the hard evidence thins out. One unconfirmed report says the disc was eventually transferred to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Another says that the disc was either transferred after that to another unnamed base or was taken directly to this unknown base directly from Atlanta. The best description of the disc was that it was 16 feet 5 inches in diameter, convex on both upper and lower surfaces to the same degree, possessing no visible doors or windows. The thickness was slightly less than 5 feet. The color was silver, much like polished steel. There was no visible lights nor any propulsion means. There were no markings. There were two areas of the rim that showed damage, one showing an irregular hole approximately 12 inches in diameter with indented material around it. The other damage was described as a dent about 2 feet wide. The weight of the object was estimated at approximately 1,500 pounds, based on the effective weight on the carrying helicopter and those who transferred it to the truck. There was no indication in the document available as to whether anything was visible in the hole. It seems likely that the damage with the hole was caused by the collision with the civilian aircraft. That collision occurred while the object was traveling approximately 1,700 knots, 1,955 miles an hour. Even ignoring the speed of the civilian aircraft, the impact would have been considerable at that speed. This is in agreement with the description of the civilian aircraft as being almost totally destroyed. What was being taken from the crash site were pieces of the civilian aircraft. The second damage may have resulted when the object impacted with the ground. The speed in that case should have been considerably less than that of the first impact. No mention is made of the occupants of the civilian aircraft. It is not known if any bodies were recovered. Considering the destruction of the civilian light aircraft in midair, bodies may well not have come down near the larger pieces. Unfortunately, what causes the deaths of the Mexican recovery team is not known. Speculation ranges from a chemical release from the disc as a result of the damage to a microbiological agent. There are no indications of death or illness by any of the U.S. recovery team. It would not have been illogical for the recovery team to have taken one of the bodies back with them for analysis, but there is no indication of that having happened. Perhaps they did not have adequate means of transporting what might have been a biologically contaminated body. Inquiries to the FAA reveal no documents concerning the civilian aircraft crash, probably because it did not involve a U.S. aircraft, nor did it occur over U.S. airspace. It should be noted that the above facts do not tell the complete story. Nothing is known of the analysis of the aircraft or its contents. Nothing is known about the deaths associated with the foreign recovery team, nor is it known of this craft was manned or not. Other questions also remain, such as why would a recovered disc be taken to Atlanta, and where did the disc come from? It was first detected approximately 200 miles from U.S. territory, yet U.S. air defense extended to a much greater distance than that. If the object descended into the atmosphere, perhaps NORAD space tracking had some record of the object. Alternate possibility is that it entered the Gulf of Mexico under radar limits, then jumped up to 7,500 feet. 75,000 feet, Considering prior behavior exhibited by disks of this size, it is probable that the entry was found from orbital altitude. The facts that are known have been gathered from 2 eyewitness accounts, documentation illegally copied, and a partially destroyed document. This was done in 1978 by a person who is now dead. Only in February of this year did the notes and documents come into the hands of our group. While the description of the crash and recovery of the unknown object broadly confirms to the data presented in other reports, the reference to an apparently lethal biological agent present at the scene is somewhat unusual. However, it is not without precedent. For example, the so-called and unofficially released Majic 12 First Annual Report document refers to what appear to have been similar biological agents present at UFO crash sites in New Mexico in 1947. According to one extract from the document titled Biological Warfare Programs, BW, or Biological Warfare Programs in US and UK, are in field test stages. Discovery of new virus and bacteria agents so lethal that serums derived by genetic research can launch medical science into unheard of fields of biology. The samples extracted from bodies found in New Mexico have yielded new strains of a retrovirus not totally understood, but give promise of the ultimate biological weapon program. The danger lies in the spread of airborne and bloodborne outbreaks of diseases in large populations with no medical cures available. And I'm reading the biological warfare book written by this man as well. Highly interesting. I don't think I'll be reading it though, because it'll probably get taken down and my channel will have a strike. The panel was concerned over the contamination of several SED personnel upon coming in contact with debris near the power plant. One technician was overcome and collapsed when he attempted the removal of a body. Another medical technician went into a coma hours after placing a body in a rubber body bag. All four were rushed to Los Alamos for observation. All four later died of seizures and profuse bleeding. All four were wearing protective suits when they came in contact with body fluids from the occupants. Autopsies on the four dead SED technicians are not conclusive. It is believed that the four may have suffered from some form of toxin or a highly contagious disease. Tissue samples are currently being kept in Fort Detrick, Maryland. In the opinion of a senior AEC medical officer, current medical equipment and supplies are wholly inadequate in dealing with a large-scale outbreak of the alien virus. Similarly, the Unauthenticated Interplanetary Phenomenon Unit summary of 1947 states, with respect to individuals present at a UFO crash site in New Mexico that same year, ground personnel from Sandita experienced some form of contamination resulting in the deaths of 3 technicians. The status of the 4th technician is unknown. Autopsies are scheduled to determine causes of death. Next incident of South Australia, Western Australia, border, 1977. The well-known Australian researcher Bill Chalker writes, in about 1977, a UFO first seen as a purple-green fireball was observed to crash near the South Australia, West Australia border, some distance north of the Erie Highway. According to Chalker's source for the account, who claimed to have been a direct participant, a quick response team headed to the crash site and found a large damaged object, completely unlike any conventional aircraft that had something of a triangular appearance. The witness informed Chalker that 2 beings were located within the craft, one apparently injured and one deceased. Both appeared to be around 5 feet in height, pot-bellied, with long arms and black eyes. Chalker's source also confided to him that the retrieval team was a joint U.S.-Australian operation and that he was personally aware of 4 apparent UFO crash events. Next incident. How long is this? Hampshire, England, 1977. Dear Mr. Redford, the letter began, I have read several of your articles in UFO magazine and thought you would be interested to know that my father was in the RAF, British Royal Air Force, in the 1950s and 1960s, and I always remember him telling me that the RAF Farnborough there was supposed to be a top secret office where the RAF carried out all its flying saucer investigations. Rumors abound that the sprawling thousand-acre plus Royal Aircraft Establishment RAE at Farnborough, Hampshire, England, housed a covertly operated unit that investigated UFOs in the 1950s and 60s. According to Cyril Townsend Withers, a senior scientific officer with the Air Ministry who specialized in radar development and deployment and who rose to the rank of wing commander during the 1960s, he had a number of discussions with people at the Air Ministry at Whitehall, London, and was informed of the existence of a specialist UFO investigation team that operated out of Farnborough. Townsend Withers further stated that the project comprised largely RAF intelligence people who viewed the UFO subject very seriously. There was also the woman whose husband was stationed at Farnborough for a 12-month period in the mid-1960s and who was directly implicated in a strange event involving the monitoring of an unidentified radio signal or language that had been detected by staff at the base. They could not decode or decipher the signal, said the woman. My husband told me that it definitely was not of human origin, and he could say no more. I think he keeps a lot to himself about his true feelings. I know he has been by the RAE. The Official Secrets Act, no doubt, but something of great importance happened that day. They snatched those special signals from space, I feel sure. Then there is Hannah Green, who lives practically on Farnborough's doorstep. I've got one hell of a view. I live in a very high spot and can see the roofs of the hangars at the base. She stated in 1996, furthermore, she had a remarkable UFO account to tell. On a clear, bright evening in July 1977, Green and her family were driving through the nearby Minley Manor woods when their attention was drawn to two couch loads of troops who were entering the woods. We had to reverse and go back, according to Green, and we did so. As we did so, I noticed just to the left what looked like a small man-made valley with steep sides about 15 feet deep. But inside this little valley there were two clear burn marks, which looked like something had either landed or crashed. Green added that the presence of so many soldiers in the area concerned her family to the extent that they swung their car around and drove back in the direction from which they had just come. All was normal until they approached a bend in the road. Standing on a gentle slope around the corner were two of the strangest-looking men Green had ever seen. Both were of an impressive height, but exceedingly thin and dressed in all-in-one white tight-fitting suits with headgear like the astronauts in the Apollo missions wore. For a moment the two men remained still, however. As Green and her family watched, transfixed, both suddenly broke into a run headed for a clearing. Most bizarre of all, Green continued to follow the path of the two men. They literally disappeared before her eyes. They vanished, simply vanished, she explained. I never forgot that. I came home, drew a picture of the two men, and wrote an account of it because it really shook me up, and I've never been in the woods since. Green continued that a number of unusual events occurred shortly afterwards that she felt were pointedly related. First, she learned that under cover of darkness, an inordinate amount of digging was going on deep within the woods. Who was doing the digging? None other than the army, precisely. That's what they were looking for. Green never found out. Oh, none other than the army. Precisely what they were looking for, Green never found out. But the mere fact that the army's activities were undertaken late at night aroused her suspicion that it was somehow connected with the curious burn marks seen in the woods, not to mention the two strange-looking men who fled the area. Green recalled a second curious event that occurred not long after. It was October 1977 in the mid-evening. There was what I call a large black cigar over the cornfields to the back of our houses. It traveled up onto Fern Hill and then headed down towards the woods. By this time, I was hanging out of the window, binoculars at the ready. I waited for about 5 minutes and could then see it above the trees. A white light on the back and a green light on the front. It then headed in my direction, and I could see that it was about 60 feet long, very black, but there was no sound whatsoever. It came right over me, and within a few minutes I was feeling very sick and dizzy. I couldn't stand up, and it was all I could do to get myself into bed fully dressed. I couldn't even undress myself. In those days we had many sightings, all of which happened as the work was going on in the woods. This unresolved case raises important questions. It is possible that the unusual scorch marks seen within Minley Woods were the result of some form of UFO crash landing. What was occurring within the woods that required the attendance of 2 couchloads of Army troops? Who were the 2 tall beings dressed like astronauts that seemed intent on exiting the area with the utmost haste? And what of the odd digging that went on after dark? Had the military discovered something in Minley Woods that they were attempting to retrieve? Thus far, the answers to these questions elude us. Okay, the incident in Peru, 1977. According to Marine Corps Lance Corporal John Weygand, in March 1977, he was dispatched to the country of Peru to provide perimeter security for a radar installation that trafficked drug aircraft in Peru and Bolivia. While on duty shortly afterwards, Weygand was ordered along with several colleagues to attend and secure nearby crash sites of what he was told was an aircraft. On arrival at the site, however, Weygand was certain that the object was no aircraft. There was, he said, a huge gash in the land where something had crashed. That something had subsequently become embedded in the side of a nearby cliff. Weygand described the object as being almost completely buried in the rock. However, he was able to determine that it was shaped like something between an egg and a teardrop. Kind of like a cigar. Dripping from the visible parts of the object was a greenish-purple syrup-like liquid that seemed to be alive and changing. Weygand recalled seeing 3 holes in the object that he speculated would have been the hatches. He saw no bodies or crew members of the object. However, he admitted to feeling some form of presence from the vehicle and stated that no less than 30 of those guys were wearing hazard suits were in attendance at the scene of the crashed object, which Weygand believes was shot down by a Hawk missile. Next incident, Sierra Madre, Mexico, August 1977. In the 5th of September 1977 edition of the Buenos Aires, Argentina newspaper Cronica was an article titled UFO Travelers Searched For that stated Mexican soldiers are looking for some little men with square feet and luminous suits who dropped from the sky about a month ago. Reports the local newspaper La Prensa. Cronica continued that while the story had been denied at an official level, rumors were in circulation in the Sierra Madre region of Mexico that a UFO had crashed in the area approximately a month previously, and that several of the crew escaped alive, while two died. Further rumors cited by Chronica suggested that at least 200 soldiers had been dispatched to the area in an effort to secure the crash site and recover both living and dead creatures. Additional data on this case is currently lacking. Last incident for today. McGuire Air Force Base, New Jersey, USA, 1978. The following document dated 16 September 1980 and written on official U.S. Air Force stationery, was forwarded to Leonard Stringfield. 1. In January 1978, I was stationed at McGuire Air Force Base, New Jersey, one evening during the time frame of 0300 hours and 0500 hours. There were a number of UFO sightings in the area over the airfield at Fort Dix MPs, and Fort Dix military polices were running code in the direction of Brownsville, New Jersey. A state trooper then entered Gate 5 at the rear of the base requesting assistance and permission to enter. I was dispatched, and the trooper wanted access to the runway area, which led to the very back of the airfield and connected with a heavily wooded area, which is part of Dick's training area. He informed me that Fort Dix MP was pursuing a low-flying object which then hovered over his car. He described it as oval-shaped with no details and glowing with a bluish-green color. His radio transmission was cut off. At that time, in front of his police car appeared a thing about 4 feet tall, grayish-brown, fat head, long arms, and slender body. The MP panicked and fired 5 rounds from his .45 caliber into the thing, and 1 round into the object above. The object then fled straight up and joined with 11 others high in the sky. This we all saw, but didn't know the details at the time. Anyway, the thing ran into the woods towards our fence line and then went to look for it. By this time, several patrols were involved. 2. We found the body of the thing near the runway. It had apparently climbed the fence and died while running. It was all of a sudden hush-hush, and no one was allowed near the area. We roped off the area, and AFOSI came out and took over. That was the last I saw of it. There was such a bad stench coming from it too, like ammonia smelling, but wasn't constant in the air. That day, a team from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base came in a C-141 and went to the area. They crated in a wooden box, sprayed something over it, and then put it into a bigger metal container. They loaded it in the plane and took off. That was it. Nothing more said, no report made, and we were all told not to have anything to say about it, or we could be court-martialed. Three, I will be getting out of the Air Force in about 2 months. Do not disclose my name, as I could get into trouble. I am interested in pursuing this and other matters if you need help. Forgive me for not signing this, but I can't take any chances. Please reply to the above address and my parents will forward it to me, or I will be home already. Don't send it here because they monitor all mail closely, and I again won't take any chances. Upon receipt of this document, Stringfield wrote to the source to whom he gave the pseudonym of Jeffrey Morse, but received no reply. A follow-up letter of 18 November 1980 did bring a response from Moore, who stated that he would try to help further, including providing Stringfield with additional corroborative sources for his account. Further correspondence submitted to Morse by both Stringfield and researcher Richard Hall remained unanswered until 27 December 1983, 17 months later. Citing his protracted silence as being the direct result of warnings, threats, and interrogations instigated by his superiors in the Air Force, Morse was now willing to enter into dialogue with both Stringfield and Hall. On 6 December 1983, Stringfield's telephone rang and he heard Morse's voice for the first time. In that conversation, Morse imparted further data relative to the alleged killing of the creature, including the fact that after the incident he had been promptly transferred to a security police squadron in Okinawa. Others, Morse told Stringfield, went to the Philippines, Germany, and Korea. Perhaps the greatest significance to Stringfield was a package received on 23 December 1983 from Morse that contained what is alleged to be an official Air Force DD Form 1569, incident/complaint form, 2 pages in length that briefly detailed the alien body recovered as originally described by Morse to Stringfield in 1980. Stringfield admitted that the document is avowedly no proof. Indeed, questions surrounding the authenticity of the document would resurface years later, as will soon become apparent. Meanwhile, on 13 January 1985, a real breakthrough came when Richard Hall was able to meet with Morse in person at a mall near Washington, D.C. According to Hall, Morse was well-groomed, friendly, relaxed, calm, articulate. He did not come across at all as someone who has concocted a tale and might contradict himself. He seemed very credible to me. Pending further investigation, I would tend to give him very high remarks. I keep a mental picture of other possible explanations, but they did not fit his image, style, or demeanor. 2 years later, Hall, Stringfield, and investigator Dr. Bruce Maccabee again met with Morse near Washington, D.C., and again the impression of Morse was favorable. Morse expressed concern that he had been subjected to constant and apparently officially orchestrated harassment that had led him to explore the possibility of taking legal action against guilty parties. Stringfield would not see or hear from Morse again. The story was over. However, in September 1988, a new source surfaced. The vice president of the Air Force Association, who 10 years earlier had been an intelligence officer with the rank of major at McGuire Air Force Base, he told Stringfield, "I remember walking into the 21st Command Post, and most people were talking about an incident that had occurred on the base during the night. The report was that an alien, a short little guy, had died from a gunshot wound." A further source, again an Officer McGuire, advised Stringfield that at the time of the incident in question, there had been significant UFO activity over the 2 large military compounds. Moreover, according to the officer, one of the craft had malfunctioned and crash-landed. One survivor of the crew managed to reach the outer perimeter near a guard post at Fort Dix and was shot by military police. In Stringfield's words, said my source, the interloper, mortally wounded, was later found dead at McGuire. Stringfield concluded, "For me, the evidence collected over 8 years of investigation into this case may not prove that UFOs are real or extraterrestrial, but it does show that such incidents, if true, would be difficult to explain to a benighted public, thus the cover-up." This would mark the end of Stringfield's investigation. However, in the 1990s, a new study of the case was launched by the Las Vegas, Nevada-based National Institute for Discovery Science, NIDS, that suggested that the McGuire incident may not have been as credible as Stringfield believed it to be. According to NIDS's own examination of the data, what is the National Institute for Discovery Science successfully located and interviewed A, the former base commander at McGuire Air Force Base who was present on July 18, 1978, B, the former commander of the 438th Security Police Squadron who confirmed that he was Security Police Commander at McGuire on July 18, 1978, C, the former Air Force Office of Special Investigations, AFOSI, Detachment Commander at McGuire Air Force Base confirmed that he was present at McGuire Air Force Base on January 18, 1978, and D, the former 21st Air Force Commander at McGuire Air Force Base in 1978. All four individuals denied any knowledge of the incident. NIDS obtained the name of an individual that the primary eyewitness Morse claimed had interrogated and debriefed him at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base following the shooting of the entity. The individual who allegedly had played the bad guy during the interrogation was identified by name and rank by Jeffrey Morse. NIDS successfully located this individual, who is a retired Judge Advocate General, JAG. Colonel, and is presently employed at a prominent law firm on the East Coast. This individual verified that indeed he had been associated with the JAG at McGuire Air Force Base at the time of the alleged incident, but A, he had never heard of the incident, B, he had never been to WPAFB at any time in his life, C, he had no knowledge of any interrogation of Morse. Finally, NIDS confirmed that a Jeffrey Morse had worked as an E4 at McGuire Air Force Base, but we were unsuccessful locating this individual. NIDS's working hypothesis, which is subject to change based on further emerging evidence, is that the 1978 McGuire Air Force Base incident did not happen. Further, the punitive fabrication of the DD Form 1569 suggests that the Fort Dix McGuire incident may be a hoax. Come on, and we'll pick up on this tomorrow.